Hey everyone, welcome to Fat Mascara. I'm Jess.
I'm Jenn. Hi.
We have an amazing interview today. I am so excited to introduce you to Ellen Atlanta. She is an author and she's an author, she's a writer, she's a fantastic journalist, and her book, Pixel Flesh, just dropped in the United States. If you're in the UK, maybe you've heard of it. Listen, she talks about a lot of the themes that we talk about all the time in this show. Jenn, let's get into this book.
We will. We'll talk about it with her. I do want to give a little bit more backdrop on who Ellen is before we let her into the virtual studio. So writer, like Jess said, brand consultant. She was the founding editor of Dazed Beauty, which has some amazing coverage. And she's consulted for brands like Boots, Estee Lauder Companies, Milk Makeup. And in 2021, she began working with UN Women UK on their digital campaigns, working to create safer spaces for women and marginalized genders. So as Jess said, she's also the author of Pixel Flesh, which was just released in the US. And that book is about how toxic beauty culture harms women. So let's talk about that, but let's also talk about the future and how we can make it better for girls and women. I think that's a big point of this interview too.
Yeah, it's not like, beauty's so toxic, nag, nag, nag. It's really, she's got a vision for how it can be better. And I like this one. I felt like we had to pull the plug because we just kept them talking for so long. We could have been here all day.
Yeah. So here is a slightly edited version of our interview with Ellen Atlanta.
Ellen, thank you so much for coming on Fat Mascara.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. I've actually been a listener for a long time, so this is making me a bit giddy.
Oh, well, that's always like a funny moment when our guest is a listener. So we appreciate the enthusiasm. And
of course.
I think this is going to be a good one because you have a lot to say about beauty. You definitely have a lot of rich thoughts, so much that you wrote a book about them. So congratulations on, it's not like it's a new book, but it's like not, basically it's just come out. Jenn is holding it up right now on the frame. Pixel Flesh. By the way, I love the cover. I know it's about more than the cover, but the cover is absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
It's coming out in the US right now. We're going to get into like the meat of it, but how would you describe the book? Just give it to me in like a nutshell. What's your elevator pitch? We're going up to the top floor. I'm a big executive, and what do you do? What do you do, Ellen Atlanta? What's the book about?
Yeah, so I either pitch it as the beauty myth for the digital generation, or
love it,
as kind of the beauty myth meets Black Mirror. I kind of had the intention of it almost reading like a book of dystopian short stories, but they're all real and they're all happening right now to women in their lives.
I'm interested. Okay.
Yay.
All right. I love it. Well, I think.
So no, Jess and I have read the book.
Yeah. That was a little acting. I don't know how I did.
Because I'm in LA, so we have to test it.
Yeah. Well, dystopia. Okay. Black Mirror meets the beauty myth. I'm sold. That's, we're optioning it for film and TV.
Thank you so much.
So what's interesting about you is like sometimes there are people who question the beauty standard, but you could tell they like hate beauty. So it's like, I'm not really interested because like I love beauty. So I don't want anyone to like kill my fun. And then there are people who will love beauty, but they don't even see that it could be, to use a term that I don't really love, but like problematic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like talking to a wall. So you love beauty. It's very clear. I'm talking to you. If you can't see, you can't see Ellen because you're listening to this. She is objectively, you're beautiful. Is that objectively or subjectively? I don't know. You're beautiful. You love beauty. Clearly, you have like pink hair. You've got green eyeshadow. You've made up. You obviously care and enjoy the process of beauty. You've got like mylar nails. What kind of nails are those? I don't know.
I've got like chrome
nails, sorry. I call them mylar. It's like my like sticker days. It's like you clearly, Jenna's like laughing at me. You love beauty and you embrace the process, but you are so clearly aware of how dangerous and dystopian this practice and this like world is right now. And I think Jenn and I are like, our eyes are wide open every day about it. When was that inflection point for you?
Yeah, I think, I grew up dyeing my hair pink. My mom was always very she very much allowed me to express myself however I wanted to. I used to lay my outfits out on the floor like little stick people and dye just my bangs pink or just put streaks in my hair. And, my first jobs were in salons. I very much saw beauty as this place of connection and community and this vehicle to bring women into spaces that were safe and allowed them self-expression and allowed gossip and, chat about very wide and ranging topics. So yeah, I love beauty. And there was a point in my career, I say I fell into beauty by accident. I was blogging my whole teenage years. I grew up in a very small village in England, and I was blogging almost every day, kind of taking pictures of my nails or my dip dye that I was doing at the time. It's really bad. I used to paint my nails differently every day before school. I used to stick beads to my nails. I used to do kind of crazy stuff. And I was offered a job kind of based off of that and based off of my Instagram, which didn't have a lot of followers at the time. I just was kind of prolifically just posting stuff. I ended up working in salons. I then started consulting for different product brands. I went to Dazed Beauty as one of the founding editors there. I then worked in different editorial arms. I then ended up in a beauty tech company. And there was a moment working for that company where this was just kind of peak girl boss feminism age. It was kind of just after kind of Kylie Jenner's announcement about her lip filler. And it felt like almost overnight the industry had transitioned from fun nail art and braids and expressive makeup into, now all of a sudden I'm promoting fillers and injectables to what is an audience of young women. And I just couldn't negotiate that. I tried for months. I was like,
body augmentation instead of going to the
ornamentation.
store.
And it felt very prescriptive. It felt very, these are the lips that you should have, and this is the chin you should have. You should even think about your chin. I remember having a conversation with my dad where I was like, oh yeah, my friends have started injecting their chins, and he was like, what? Like, why, what? Like, people are thinking about their chin. And it kind of this ever intenser fragmentation of ourselves and faces, and these kind of ever more prescriptive ideas of what those very specific parts of us needed to look like. And my job went from something that felt very fun and quote unquote empowering to something that felt quite insidious and something I didn't really feel I could consciously do. And so I quit my job in 2019 with no job to go to, not knowing there was a pandemic coming. But yeah, I think it was one of the best things I ever did. And I started taking notes. I had notes from that time where I write, I should write a Black Mirror set of short stories about beauty. And this was years ago.
Did you tell people openly, why?
Yeah.
That this was at odds with your values, or did you?
No, very much so. It was kind of part of my conversation when I left. And it wasn't an easy thing within the company I worked for. And I knew it wasn't an easy thing for the other people working in beauty at the time. There was a constant kind of attempt to navigate what feminism looked like with this beauty culture. And it was very easy to say, well, it's about choice and women can choose.
Yeah, you mentioned girl boss. So I think you're framing it as it's about choice, options, you do you.
That doesn't hold when you kind of step back and look at a wider system that shows very real rewards for adhering to a very homogenous prescriptive ideal.
We're going to get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah. There's a lot of different ways we can go here. So what do you think right now? So that was, the girl boss moment, Kylie Jenner getting the lips. What is the beauty standard right now? Today we're recording in the summer of 2024. Is there a beauty standard right now?
Of course. And in some ways, I think it's only gotten more intense since I quit my job in 2019. I think COVID obviously accelerated a lot of the trends we've seen in injectables, skincare, anti-aging, which I know we're going to talk about. We are seeing, unfortunately, numbers in eating disorders arising. The perfectionism and the anxiety felt by very young girls is only increasing. The fact they feel they need to look perfect all the time is increasing. So I think our beauty standards are becoming, unfortunately, more restrictive. And I do acknowledge there is kind of this parallel narrative of anti-beauty, I guess, that's kind of embracing more expressive and more otherworldly, less prescriptive ideas of beauty. But when we look at the data, kind of what's felt on the ground with young women and girls is this kind of hyper prescriptive, ever more intense, ever more fragmented. Young girls know names for things that I didn't even know when I was a kid. Like, I don't even want to say them. I struggle with doing interviews like this because certain parts of bodies, it's like if I say it, then you know that you know to acknowledge it, and then it becomes potentially a thing.
You don't have to say it.
No, but like there's parts of ourselves that I think young girls are focusing on that just seem wild to even think about. Or, I've spoken to doctors that are saying they're getting teenage girls coming in and talking about, oh, well, I look old because when I smile, I get these lines here. And it's like, well, yeah, that's your face moving. That's a very natural and beautiful response to you expressing emotion. And so this need to kind of pick yourself apart, I think, is only getting more intense, unfortunately.
I completely agree. Completely agree. And then something, you've talked about with this beauty standard, you said that, this is a quote from your book. I really like this part. You said, if too many women attain the beauty standard, the goalpost moves. And for those who can afford it to keep up, and those who can't are swept to the side. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's this idea that despite the fact that we have this homogenous beauty ideal right now, beauty ultimately is defined by rarity. If it's too easy to obtain, if it's too accessible, it no longer holds the currency and the value that it once did.
That's nice, isn't that?
Yeah, it's lovely.
So kind.
And, I talk a lot about class in the book, and I talk a lot about wealth. And it's an age-old thing that beauty standards have typically served the wealthy and the ruling classes and the most privileged. And we see it now with kind of the Kardashians or whoever, and their ability to shapeshift and mold themselves, get a treatment and then undo it, or quote unquote undo it, or to kind of drastically change their body in response to these trends or to set these trends. But most people don't have the means to do so and are spending a huge amount of money to catch up, only for the goalpost to move and change.
You must know Lauryn Hill. Like, you must know her.
Yeah, we spoke actually about the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So Lauryn Hill, who anyone doesn't know who that is, she's a very big Instagram and YouTube channel, Lorry Hill. And she tracks, and she's very careful about the language she uses. She's like, this person is beautiful. And they've always been beautiful. But look how their look has changed. And she suggests, if I'm being really, I want you to really watch what I say because I don't want to misquote her, but she'll just show the trajectory of a celebrity, like A-list celebrities, and how their look has changed, if suggesting maybe that they had something done. And it's like that old saying, like, money's the best moisturizer. It's like she's drawing that connection between class and beauty. And I think you did a great article in Dazed, and we can link to it, about how much class shows up now in beauty treatments. Can you give us a few examples, or in the beauty space, can you give us a few examples? You mentioned the Kardashians. That's a very, very clear example, but where else does that show up? I mentioned Lauryn Hill. Where else does it show up?
Well, beauty, like we said, is a kind of constant negotiation of power and privilege, and that was something that I was thinking about a lot in the book. And it's not as easy just to say, you shouldn't do this or you should do this, because our ideas of beauty and ugliness and what that means and what that translates into, whether that's increased opportunity or better treatment or even better health or employment outcomes, is very real. And that, beauty as a currency is not available to all women equally. For trans women or women of color, often it's about safety, it's about freedom from violence. And so it becomes very difficult to then place a blanket judgment on who should or shouldn't do what and what that means. But yeah, we see it all the time. We've seen it throughout history, whether it's, online, it's very prevalent in, I know so many girls that are having their lifestyles funded because of the way that they look. Girls, part of my interview process, were saying things, like, I didn't pay for meals for the first few weeks I was in London because I was just getting them paid for me the whole time because they happen to be beautiful or attractive. And
wait, because they're influencers, because they are
because they
pseudo sugar daddy vibes were some of the examples in my mind.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily about having loads of followers. I think for a lot of these women, it became about posturing as such. So it became about cultivating a very specific aesthetic, kind of posing with bags from luxury stores, even though the bags were empty, or buying expensive dress, trying it on in the changing room, taking pictures, and then not buying it. Going to these kind of fancy places and just taking pictures of the outside, but kind of creating this image of privilege, which then generates more privilege.
I see that all the time in New York, and it's like it kind of makes me wonder. It kind of bothers me. You know, people just take pictures outside of these stores, and it's like, what did this store do to kind of earn that moment in that family vacation? Yeah. You know what I mean? It's such a strange...
Well, it's a marker of class, to go back to what Jess was talking about. Like, it says, I'm part of this world.
Yeah, for sure.
It's so strange.
There's this kind of... I think now we're living in such a visual culture, and an increasingly visual digital culture, that the beauty tax that we have to pay, specifically as women, and I do think this is a very gendered thing, the ideal intensifies. There's not this expectation for women just to get, you know, maybe in the 90s, noughties, it was your brows maybe and a bit of makeup, maybe a manicure. But now it's like your teeth have to be perfect. Your hair needs to be done. Your hair needs to be touched up and cut properly. Your nails have to be done. You have to have your eyebrows, your lashes. You have to maintain a very specific body composition. And then there's the anti-aging thing on top of that, about if you're kind of getting the right fillers and injectables. And we see it online. The women that are the most celebrated online typically have undergone, as Laurie Hill points out, various and extensive surgeries and treatments. There was that meme format that was going viral for a while that was like, I'm not ugly, I'm just poor. That looked at like Kylie Jenner, Bella Hadid, Simeon Hayes, those kind of celebrities, and kind of demonstrates how if you have economic freedom and you have the means, you can buy the currency that's associated with being beautiful. And what's interesting is I work with a charity in London that provide kind of beauty spaces for marginalized women and girls, partly as a vehicle to kind of bring them into a safe space, again, to talk about things like domestic violence or safety online and relationships and that kind of thing. But also one of the things the founder said was that she would come to these communities and often be the least glammed up woman in the room. And she said her first instinct was to think, well, you know, you're on free school meals or you're incredibly marginalized. Why are you prioritizing your nails or your lashes or your teeth or something? Like, shouldn't you be spending money on something else? And she was like, you know, that was very much my privilege talking.
Yeah.
What is possible when you feel you're lacking in hope or opportunity, and you have to consider what has social currency in that community, what's going to improve your life experience, what's going to make the difference between you getting home safe or not. And what we see often is that middle class or upper class women have the ability to invest in these things almost as like a treat or as a way to increase their currency, whereas more marginalized women are often getting into debt, prioritizing beauty over other kind of quote unquote essential purchases, simply because they see it as a way not only to access more opportunity, whether that's employment or kind of socially, but also it's a way to be seen as a human being, a way to be respected, as to be seen as sometimes often even just clean, hygienic, a worthy human that's, you know, deserves respect and attention. So yeah, I think it's really tricky, and I think often we're given very little choice but to chase that to get a better slice of the world.
You give an example though in the book of you could chase it all you want, but that doesn't mean you're going to ever be able to recoup those losses. You were talking about a woman who wanted to try out for Love Island.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by this. Can you tell what she did? And also please explain to me the Love Island aesthetic in general.
So it also feeds into class, because typically, I guess, more working class beauty culture is more associated with a display of wealth. It's very much about, you know, in the same way about like logos on designer items, it's about demonstrating that you have the means to undergo that work and do that labor, and it's a show of the labor. It should be overt in order to carry value in those communities. So often we see kind of bigger lips, we see more exaggeration, we see longer hair extensions, we see darker tan, we see more whiter veneers. And that is kind of an association with the Love Island aesthetic. Often the people going on that show are from more working class backgrounds. Often they're trying to generate currency in the digital world, which is often based on exaggeration because you're kind of having to stand out in smaller boxes and in a sea of faces. And yeah, one of the women I interviewed was so determined that that was going to be her career path, that going on Love Island was her goal. She used her student loans, which in the UK I think works slightly differently. You kind of get a much lower interest rate loan from the government. But she used her student loans to pay for a huge amount of procedures, fillers, a breast augmentation, with the specific goal of getting on Love Island. And what seems like a very lucrative career path, if it will work for you. Look at Molly May, look at all these kind of internationally now known celebrities. And she didn't get in, kind of after those months and months of labor and of pain and of investment, quote unquote, she didn't make it. And what's interesting when we talk about beauty as currency and beauty as class is that whilst that aesthetic holds currency as an influencer on reality TV, maybe in sex work, it doesn't translate into maybe the more professional sector, IRL. That if you showed up kind of with that Love Island aesthetic to be a manager at an office or in those kind of sectors, it wouldn't hold that currency. And in fact, it might work against her in applying for those kind of jobs. And so often what we find, it comes up over and over again, this kind of tightrope we walk as women investing, again, I use that word loosely, in beauty culture, is this idea that I think all of us, doesn't matter what aesthetic you're trying to achieve, are on this tightrope of you have to do enough to look like you're making effort and that you care and that you're like, quote unquote, looking after yourself, whilst not doing too much to be seen as vulgar, excessive, deceitful, like you care too much, that, your priorities aren't in the right order. And that applies to women. I speak to founders, I speak to even myself as an author. It's like, how much do I need to do to be visible for my book to sell, whilst negotiating this culture in general?
We've seen that too with the Kardashians, who seem to be like a through line in your book. It was almost like every example and chapter you were telling a story, it somehow also came up in their family life, where they get to a point where their appearance there's a backlash to the backlash kind of thing. Why do you think their journeys are so indicative of where we are in beauty culture right now?
That's really tricky. I think they are kind of going to be the last of kind of the 360 celebrity, kind of going from TV to digital to they kind of occupy every space in media for us.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Gen Alpha, Gen Z won't be kind of watching TV in the same way that we did kind of growing up, maybe. So I think they're going to be the last of that kind of globally known celebrity in the same way. But they definitely led this hyper augmented aesthetic. And yeah, I didn't want them to be recurring characters. It was kind of an unfortunate side effect.
Just like
no. It was. I had this conversation with one of my editors. She was like, "Oh, you have to maybe plot out." This was very early on, kind of who the recurring characters are going to be. And I was like, oh, I just have to accept now that the Kardashians are going to be recurring characters because they're so relevant.
They're an example that a lot of people can relate to because at least they'll know who I'm talking about, where if you picked like a small influencer online, a certain age group or niche might know, but then your older audience might not know. So
and it's thinking about the impact that they have, the size of their following when we compare it to beauty magazines, when we compare it to traditional media, is insane. And the fact that they're a family, so they have this kind of networked approach. If you're not following one, you might be following another. And then their relationship with beauty is just so fascinating, kind of whether you agree with it or not. It's an incredibly interesting look. Remember when that picture of Chloe went viral, the bikini picture went viral that their grandmother had taken, And they were like, sending cease and desist letters
I did
to get
exactly
it taken
what
down.
you probably didn't want me to do when I read that in your book. I didn't remember the photo. She's talking about Khloe, I believe, Kardashian. Yeah. And so I paused your book and went and got my phone to look up the photo.
It's a lovely picture.
First of all, she looks amazing. But I was like, I just fell into the trap of like what you're trying to get me not to do, which is be a viewer and objectify.
Yeah, I think I can't fault people's inevitable curiosity. But yeah, I think even their response to that was so interesting. So the picture went viral. It was an unedited bikini picture of Khloe. And, she was sending cease and desist letters. They were kind of tracking down people online to stop them from posting it, to get it taken down. There was a very aggressive response that was then followed up with this kind of message from Khloe that was like, I struggle with the way I look, and I deserve the right to control this image of myself, and I just want to be seen as being human. And it was like, whilst I can empathize, it's so ironic that you want to be perceived as a human being whilst refusing to allow us to see any human elements of yourself. I mean, also, this is already
And the best part is her grandmother took the photo, which is like the most human thing. It was a family member who sees you through a lens of like love and admiration who took the photo.
Yeah, exactly. And a body that's already allegedly augmented. She has access to the best personal trainers, nutritionists, dietitians, chefs, surgeons, and she still can't post an image of herself that is unedited. And if that doesn't kind of indicate the issue, if she can't even do that as one of the richest women in the US or as one of the most influential women in this culture, what are kind of teenage girls supposed to do? What must that feel like?
Do you think that because they've had such an effect, that family, on body image, do you think it's just what already exists inside people? Or do you think that this was like something, I don't think they had a meeting and like, this is what we're going to do to people's body images. Do you think like if it wasn't them, it would have been somebody else?
I don't know. I think that's really hard because I think they're so specifically placed, I think, as a group of women.
Because every like body trend in the past, like, every big body like moment, like the lips or the butt or the tiny, tiny waist, there's so many things goes back to like a Kardashian. It's like this nexus of so many things. If they didn't, this is such a silly kind of like hypothetical thing. It doesn't matter. But like if they didn't exist as this phenomenon, would all of these things happen?
I think they might have done, but I think the intensity would have lessened. I think the fact that they are kind of a network matrix of kind of beauty power I think that makes a difference. And I think we're now past the point where we can say they're not doing it consciously, because they are definitely aware of the role they play. And I think it frustrates me that we kind of are now in this, I think they like to victimize themselves a lot without really ever taking any accountability for
sure.
the impact they've had. And, like Kylie there was that, oh my God, it was after I'd submitted my manuscript and they released the trailer for, I think, season 3. And she's like, we have to have this conversation about the standards that we're setting. And I was like, oh my God, I have to rewrite the whole of my first chapter. Like, this is going to completely, but then she, came out in the tiny, tiny corset and the hip padding in Paris. And my whole feed was filled with
comfort. Yeah.
Do you think they've done anything positive for body positivity?
No. I think there was this idea that at one point that they had created a space for some women of color to feel more accepting of maybe their curvier bodies. I definitely heard that a few times, but then I think the commodification of that body type, when we're talking about kind of BBL, the height of BBL culture, I guess. The fact that they commodified it, but then also almost turned it into a caricature. They made it so extreme that it became a caricature. I think that then had the reverse effect, that a lot of young women of color now feel they are compared to a Kardashian body type. And it's like, well, that's quote unquote what women of color are supposed to look like, and you don't live up to that, so you're therefore lacking. And I think to do that as well without any acknowledgement of the impact that had on women of color, the fact that they were kind of profiting from an aesthetic that was taken from minority women. So yeah, I've heard certain things from, again, certain women. I think it's a very subjective thing about maybe at that time they felt more accepting of their curvier bodies, but I think they kind of quickly undid that with how quickly that they kind of pushed that aesthetic to the side and with how little they actually acknowledged the women that they were prototyping almost.
Understood. That leads me to my next question. So right now we're in this kind of interesting Y2K beauty and fashion moment, but we did have this moment about in the past 10 years or so of body positivity, whatever you want to take from that, body neutrality. With having lived through that experience, whether some people think it was effective, some people think it was a marketing moment, some people think it was, a little
I hate
thin.
that you keep calling it a moment. I wanted to keep going, but yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I guess because I keep on calling it a moment that may betray, that may reveal what I think about it. I do think it was a great thing. I believe that there's truth and value in the Dove campaign and all of the things we saw in media. But the fact that we're back here again with so many super skinny images and a lot of the things I'm reading and the aspirational super skinny and like hyper wellness, like orthorexia type of content I'm seeing makes me think that we didn't go as far along as, we're not as evolved as I think we are in terms of the culture. So that's my feeling. What's your feeling, Ellen?
My feeling is similar, but also with this kind of undercurrent that unfortunately it never really went away. I mean, even when kind of, again, to reference kind of peak BBL era, which was kind of also the rise of the body positivity movement, eating disorder stats were still rising. And what I thought was interesting is there wasn't this kind of, trends now don't seem to replace one another. They just seem to add on top of one another. So it wasn't that you had to have like a big bum and you could be curvy. It was like, oh no, you can have a big bum, but you also have to have a tiny waist. Like you can't have one without the other. You have to have a perfectly flat stomach and large perky boobs and skinny arms. It was kind of this aesthetic that you can only ever achieve through artificial means. Like no one naturally is built with that kind of body composition. And so it's tricky. And now it feels like whether it was a marketing moment or whether, I know a lot of kind of women that were part of that movement are feeling quite resentful of the fact of how quickly it felt like it was swept away, of how quickly it was like, oh, that was cute for a bit, but now we want to be skinny again.
Yeah, I feel like it was like a pendulum swing, or like it was cute for a moment, or I do think there was some impact. I do think now you can't be a brand that isn't size inclusive, or like a more mass fashion brand that isn't size inclusive without hearing pushback. I do think that there were some actual results, but to see how far we are now, and like 10 years ago, I think if you saw some of like the models that are out or like just some of the imagery, there would be more, oh my God, that's not okay. And now it's like, oh my God, it's totally okay now. But I think we're a little bit smarter now that we have the hindsight of the moment, whatever you want to call it, to be a little bit more outwardly, audibly critical out loud. And that to me that is like a great takeaway. So I don't think it was all for naught, but I don't think we're as far evolved as we think we are.
Do you think Ozempic had anything to do with that?
Probably.
I'm not being funny. I'm serious. Like,
it's the accessibility.
It's like that class.
I thought you were being
class thing
funny.
We were talking about. All of a sudden, for people with the means, there was a drug that was expensive that, oh, just kidding. I can be body neutral until, oh, wow.
It's like, oh, wait, guys over here. Wait, oh, that was cool, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, but now I can reap the rewards. So actually, I'm going to kind of turn my back on all of you.
Like really quietly, just kind of.
I bet some people feel that way about the people they looked up to.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. You see that all the time with, I don't want to name names because I don't want to get sued, but maybe we can do a Lauryn Hill and be like, she looked great before and she looks great now.
Yeah. And it's really tricky, isn't it? Because it's hard to, I'm always wary of playing into this idea of talking, like dissecting women's bodies and kind of, you don't know what people are going through and et cetera, et cetera. But then it's kind of constantly balancing that empathy with the accountability and saying like, yeah, but I still wish you didn't do that. And I wish that wasn't the case. And
if they're happier now, if they were really unhappy and they didn't feel good, they didn't look good. And like, body stuff is hard. Body stuff is really hard. It is so hard. It is mental. It is physical. It takes up time, it takes up mental energy.
And I think for me, it's about like this, and I talk about this in the book, but I think when it's coming from a place of kind of true collective empowerment, and when you're making that decision kind of with the wider community in mind, making these decisions on beauty for your sisters, your daughter, your nieces, your friends, I think we would make different decisions rather than the culture we have right now, which I think is hugely individualistic. It kind of prioritizes, as long as you're good, everything's fine, and it's not your problem how everyone else feels, and they should just get therapy and sort themselves out, and they're just jealous and blah blah blah. I think we only suffer when the approach to beauty comes from that very kind of individualistic place. Obviously is fueled by capitalism and these kind of platforms that make you kind of create a shrine for yourself. As much as it's kind of about looking at other people, it's also about heavily curating this image of yourself, and a lot of us focus more intently on how we're coming across than looking at other people. But yeah, that's why for me it has to come from this kind of collective space. It has to come from talking to the young girls I've spoken to, and every time I'm tempted to do something, I'm like, but actually I have to think of these 8-year-old girls I'm talking to who are like, I don't go outside after school anymore because I don't want people to see my face in real life any more than they already have to. And I'm like, what do you mean have to? Like, as if subjecting them to your like natural face as a 9-year-old child is somehow traumatizing.
And that individualism that you're talking about, I feel like it erases one of the good parts of beauty. Because as we're talking about the toxicity of beauty culture, like for Jess and I, we often talk about the community is like, you even have an example in your book when like a bunch of women are together in a very weird club that I'll ask you about offline. I want to know what's up with this club where you don't pay to get in and then whatever. But in the bathroom, there was that, we're all looking in the mirror together. We're hyping each other up. We're sharing lip gloss. This is fun. This is about making friends and community. And the minute you become individualistic about it, you lose that part of it.
Yeah. And so much of beauty culture through the lens of capitalism is about pitting women against each other. There is so much that they stand to gain from us feeling jealous and competitive. And for me, that's beauty has been taken from us and like twisted and sold back to us as something that's so devolved from what it once was. Like beauty for me as being, like you said, in a nightclub bathroom with other women, it's about getting ready with your friends for a night out and how beautiful it is to have someone play with your hair or do your eyeshadow for you and how intimate and special that feels.
The salon that you were talking about.
The salon, like how girls would come into our salons and be like, I just need to charge my phone so I can get home safely. And they knew it was a safe space they could come to in the evening to sit and charge their phone. Or older women would come into the salon and say, like, no one's held my hand in months. And that was the first physical contact they'd had. How often hairdressers become pseudo therapists, and how so many of my friends have been with their hairdressers longer than they've been with any partner they've had. And so, yeah, for me, it was really important to have these pockets of the beauty of beauty culture within a book that, I had to come down. I had to have a subheading. So it is generally about how beauty culture is harming women, but hopefully with these pockets of this is how it should be, and this is the magic of it, and this is what we need to fight for to claim back. And it should be about doing things that you wanted to do when you were 5, if that meant dyeing your hair blue or green or wearing lipstick and glitter and having fun, I think. And like you said, community, I'm always for anything that fosters community and connection.
In your book, you ask this question. You probably have gotten this from other interviewers with this book, but you asked many people this, so we're going to ask you this. How can we create a more beautiful future for women and girls? But also, Jess, I want to know your answer too. So,
me?
But it's Ellen, how can we create a more beautiful... Hey, you were the one who posed this question.
It was
it's
me.
The underlying principle of this book.
It is. And so I asked that in every single interview. I interviewed over 100 women, and those answers on like between every chapter of the book to kind of provide some answers and some hope as you're reading along. But yeah, often I was faced with like, I don't even know, like often it became really difficult to think of a possibility for a future that wasn't constrained by these standards. But for me, it's about raising women and girls with a more holistic approach. It's about 2 things for me. Sorority is self-care, is something I say in the book, but this idea of this collective mindset about making those decisions for the women around you. It's like, how would I feel if my friend did this? How is this going to impact the younger women in my life? What standard of beauty is this going to set for them? Is it going to tell them that you have to spend money or starve yourself or change yourself beyond recognition in order to be pretty, that you are defective by default? I think doing what we can to prevent that messaging for the women around us is so important. And I think we have so much more power than we realize. We talk about influencers online. We are influencers for the women closest to us, and we have so much power with the language that we use and the way we talk about ourselves and we talk about other women. So that's the first thing. The second thing for me is about, I kind of loosely call it, like, I have a sticker that says nurturing myself in every dimension. But this idea that rejecting this idea that we must exist as these 2D beings. I think women were often flattened. It's like we had to fight to exist in 2D, then we had to fight to exist in 3D to kind of take up space, and now we have to fight to exist in 4D for, like, the right to age and exist and evolve in time. And so I think instead of prioritizing what looks good for other people, it's kind of refusing to be flattened and focusing on what feels good, smells good, tastes good. If you want to get a pastry, eat the damn pastry. If you want to, it goes to sex and safety, like what feels pleasurable to you, what feels good to you. I think it's about asking yourself those questions and making sure the young girls around you are prioritizing that for themselves as opposed to just what looks good for everyone else, what feels good for them. Those are kind of my two main answers that I've come to.
That second one's good. Stop thinking of yourself as a perceived being, like what, because a lot of the women use that language when you interviewed them. They were like thinking about how this would look, whether in a picture to their friends, whatever, but instead thinking about like, how does this feel to me personally? Like,
yeah, it's like when you're on a date, it's like, instead of thinking about if they like you, thinking about if you actually like them, instead of feeling like you're constantly auditioning for something. It's like, I had spoke to one influencer that was like, you couldn't pay me to go back to my 20s because I was just performing. I was just responding to what was going on around me. I wasn't taking an agentic role and thinking about what I wanted and what felt good for me. And I think that's so important.
Jess, what about you?
That's a hard one. That's a big question. I think whatever I answer now, I'm going to think of something later. But right away, I think it's probably just pay attention to them. You know what I mean? I think people don't really pay attention, like real attention to what they're saying. So just probably being present with them and just paying attention to them. Like what they say matters, even, and just having a moment with them. And just this sounds a little trite, but like showing that
No, I think often with little girls, we're like, oh, that's sweet. Okay, sit down, be quiet or whatever. They say something and they're performing and you look at it and move on, but like don't really listen to them and don't really see them.
Yeah,
I get
their
what you're
life,
saying.
like when you think about you when you're younger, your life was just as important as it is today as an adult. Those feelings were just as real. You weren't like, oh, it's all right. My real life's going to start when I'm 40. Like your life was just as important as it is. It's all the same.
It plays into beauty as well. I think often when I was speaking to young girls, it was this, I think the knee-jerk reaction when they're talking about beauty is just to be like, oh, well, you're beautiful inside now, and just like brush off their thoughts and feelings, as opposed to leveling with them that, this is a very rational thing to feel because this is the culture that we live in and this is what's making you feel like that. And why is that you feeling like that is more important than just kind of brushing off what they're thinking as trivial or silly.
Yeah. I think that's what I mean. It's like take them seriously, because I think that when I was younger, I could tell when people were not taking me seriously at all. And it's like when somebody takes you seriously, even for a minute, it's like, oh no, okay, like I feel validated.
For sure.
And you kind of remember who takes you seriously and who does not.
Yeah.
I want to hear yours, Jen.
Oh, right. Sorry, you did ask that.
Yeah.
I think Jess has heard me speak about this before, but I think that some sort of, I'm going to be really practical, mandatory team sports would do wonders for girls. And I understand not everybody's athletic, but that's why I say team sports, because it teaches you to use your body and for what your body can do and to be a teammate and help others. And nobody's going to succeed unless you are all working together.
That's really
and you
good.
never think about what you look like when you're doing sports. At least I never did. Like, it was like, wow, my arms are amazing. They just stroked 100 meters. Like, my legs are sick. I could just run that fast. Or I helped that person up when they fell down. And I just feel like the more like a team sport could be brought into the education setting, not to be graded. First of all, my stepson is in Germany and he gets graded on like his skills in gymnastics.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, that's not the grade I want to be given.
Are gymnastics a team sport?
No, gym meaning sport, just like gym class. Like whether he catches the ball or not. And I'm like, wait, you get an F if you don't catch the ball? He's like, no, because you didn't catch the ball. And I'm like, no, that's not what I mean. I mean the thing of like, I tried. I helped my teammate who didn't get the ball or go this way. And I sometimes feel really guilty that I think I escaped a lot of the body issues that a lot of my peers have. And I think the only reason is because I never thought of my body as a thing to be seen. I thought of it as a tool to do sports and, you know.
I think you're right. No, Jen, I think you're like absolutely right about the team sport thing. And like, by the way, I'm not suggesting anyone should like aspire to be on this track, but like there's a real stat, I'm sure it takes 1 second to Google, about like people who are on team sports and like being CEOs. Like most CEOs were like team sports people.
Interesting.
And again, I do not think that is like the goal in life, but I think it's like leadership, like discipline, like just, you know.
Not winning, but yeah, those
it's
things.
like leadership, discipline, like executive function, like all of those things. And it's also like I'm sure there's like most CEOs are probably have like failed many times in their life. They've like taken blows and they just dust themselves off and get back up. Like I was not a team sport person, but but like I did not. I did no, thank you. No thanks. I do not connect with my body in that way at all. But when I see, like, my husband's hugely into sports, and when I watch sports with him, or like I watch a sports documentary, or even when like my daughter's just been in like a couple like little games and stuff, I'm like, this is the real. I mean, when I say games, I mean like that's very loosely.
But that doesn't matter.
But like,
she's like,
I'm like, whoa, I'm like, you need to learn to lose. You need to learn to be upset. You need to learn to like know that somebody is just freaking better than you. You know what I mean? Like,
that's a good lesson. I hadn't even thought about that side of it, but that's
some
an
people are just better
lesson
than
as
you.
well.
Somebody is born to win it. Like, and like, there's a kid who's just, this kid is in it. Like, they love it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or this kid's gonna show up every day. Like they're practicing. They've got a little freaking net at home. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many.
I want it to be comfortable for the kids that aren't that kid, so that they don't feel like they're losers.
Right.
That kid who is really good helps them, and together they're getting all that good stuff that I think we want for girls.
Right. Yeah. Like, there's different roles in like society. There's different roles in an organization. Who are you? Are you the best water boy? Are you the best?
No, like, but if someone falls over, will you comfort them really well and make them feel better? Yeah. That's a great role.
Are you the manager? Are you the agent?
My best friend was the team manager. Jess was like, when I got like really into sports, like almost every team I was ever on, she was the manager of the team too. And
oh
it
my
was
God,
like,
that's awesome.
Such an important role, but like you're part of the
team. Like, the managers are cool. Like, they're like, they're counting.
Me with the clipboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, the clipboard. I just picture it in high school next to, with the clipboard.
That general idea of embodiment, focusing on embodiment over aesthetic, came up over and over again throughout my research as an incredibly positive, not only like short-term defense against like toxic beauty culture, but also as a long-term protective. So it definitely is a salve for young girls. And I think it was Dr. Renee Engeln, who has a book called Beauty Sick, but she described the idea of kind of redirecting your brain, thinking about, instead of this looks like this, thinking, you know, my arms allow me to pick things up or hug my friends, or my legs allow me to run fast, or those kind of thoughts, kind of making people think those thoughts and say them out loud was some of the best data she'd seen in her lab, like some of the happiest, most fulfilling data. And then they identified not only that kind of short-term impact, but then it had a long-term protective shield against future kind of negative self-thought.
Imagine if it wasn't even just like a corny, I'm not saying it's corny, but like a tool. Sometimes you feel silly saying things like that to yourself as an adult woman, but it would already be ingrained in you if you grew up thinking that. So yeah, that's interesting.
The body as a tool.
Is amazing.
The body is a tool.
The body is a tool. It does awesome things.
Yeah. And so often I think we're told through like objectification, or this came up a lot, whether it's we're talking about pregnancy or whether we're talking about sex, like this idea that women's bodies have value when it's valuable for other people, whether we hold sexual value, whether we hold value as like a vessel for a child. That's why kind of postpartum women often feel devalued in society. It's because you aren't holding value for someone else in that moment. And so I think kind of taking yourself out of that paradigm and allowing your body to create value for you as an individual, because you can do all of these things. You can participate in team sports, you can move your body, you can support other people. I think redirecting into that kind of prevents against objectification as well, because your body is creating value for yourself.
I love that.
Yeah. We didn't even dig into half of what you cover in your book, which is amazing. So I encourage everybody to get it. Before we let you go, though, we got to do the Fat Mascara 5. You're a listener. You know what this is. Little speed round. And we didn't even talk about beauty products, because you can do all this, by the way, everyone, and still love a nice lipstick. Just saying.
Wait, what is on your, can we ask her what's on her eyes? Because it's
yes, what is the shadow on your eyes?
It's like such a mix of things. What I actually wanted was there's a Chanel eyeshadow that's like a mint sparkly green. But it's not in stock. It wasn't in stock. So what I've done is like layer, I think it's this Kiko blue silver with like a Huda Beauty sparkly green from a palette on top. But what I'm trying to recreate is the Chanel mint sparkly
I know that
eyeshadow.
iridescent. It doesn't look quite green in the compacts, but then it goes on with that.
So that's what I wanted to create. This idea of like baby pink hair with an iridescent green eyeshadow just was speaking to me. So I had to do it.
So Ellen, what was the first beauty product you fell in love with?
It was actually the Touche Eclat, which is so random.
Oh,
because my mum had it.
Chic.
And I think someone at school said something like, "Why do you have purple eyeshadow under your eyes?" And I was like, "What?" And so then actually, this is how I started blogging, because I then started Googling how to get rid of dark under eye circles. I found a YouTube channel that was reviewing concealers. I think they were reviewing Benefit Boing at the time. And I was like, wow, I can make a whole magazine online. Because I used to just make them with highlighter pens and like printer paper. And that's when I started like, I could be a blogger. But yeah, I think I stole my mum's Touche Eclat and I was like, wow, I'm transformed. Which is really toxic looking back, but that was the truth. That was my first ever like beauty moment, really.
You saw a problem as you saw it as a problem, and then you were like, I'm going to fix this.
Yeah, and I was amazed.
Okay, what's a work of art that you think about often or you're always going back to?
It could be like a song, it could be a movie, it could be a painting, anything.
Whatever art means to you.
There's a Tim Walker photograph that I have framed above my couch at home where I write. And it's really hard to describe, sorry, for an audio experience, but it's of a woman with kind of this kind of metal kind of frame over her face. She has kind of bright pink blush on, and it's kind of blurry and dark, and it has these kind of pink, blue, black, lilac tones, and it has pearls on it, and she just looks very otherworldly. And to me, that's an image I kept coming back to for Pixel Flesh, of like, this for me is kind of what true self-expression could look like. And now as I'm writing another book or writing novels, I kind of keep coming back to this image of this. Every time I focus on different parts of it, but this idea of this otherworldly image of beauty that kind of resists a lot of the kind of prescriptive structures of what women should look like.
Well, then this next question might play into that. Who or what is your favorite fictional character?
All I've got going around in my head is Lyra from His Dark Materials, because that was just my like obsessive series growing up. Those books changed my life, so I feel like she stands out to me. And this idea that they had these kind of souls that existed outside of their bodies was just so fascinating to me. So yeah, that's the only thing that's popping up in my head. Right, I'm sure I'll leave this and think of like 7, but that's the only thing that's coming to me right now.
This Fat Mascara 5 is a moment in time. It's however you're answering while we're chatting with you. It doesn't need to be prescriptive for the rest of your life. So 2 more questions. What's your most favorite snack or indulgent kind of snack?
Oh my God, right now it's these, because I can only get them here. It's the almond butter almonds from Trader Joe's, which are just incredible.
Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
They know how to make a snack.
It's an almond coated in almond butter, and it's just amazing. Like, I love it. And I can't get it at home.
All right, we'll pack those in your bag when you go back home. Now, it's 12 noon on a Saturday. Imagine it, your day off, whatever day that is. What are you doing?
I love that time. I am at a Zumba class at my local leisure centre, which feels off-brand, but I love it so much, and I rave about it to everyone because my local leisure centre, the Zumba classes specifically, a whole range of women go. The other week we had one of the women turn 95 and we had a party for her. But I just love that it's a whole group of women from my community from 18 to 95, all just kind of shaking their asses and having fun and feeling sexy and doing what they can. Like, I come out drenched in sweat, but there's still, the 8-year-olds at the back kind of just grooving along. And it just makes me feel so good about my body in a way that exercise hasn't previously. And I think I always worked out in a form of punishment when I was growing up and in my teen years and early 20s. And now, I go to this class 3 or 4 times a week and I just get hyped up by loads of women, and they've all bought my book and they're all, it's
shout
so
out to the
lovely.
Zumba. What's the community center? We have to say hi to the ladies.
It's called, what's it actually called? It's called the...
It's in London, right?
Maybe she doesn't want
London.
Maybe she just want fans.
We don't
fans
have to.
coming to her Zumba class.
But yeah, it's called it's my local leisure centre.
Local leisure centre.
And it's all different sizes and shapes of women, and it's really instilled this idea in me that fit can look so different. And there's women there that can twerk like nothing else, and you would look at them in the supermarket and never realize. And there are women there who are doing the whole thing with like 5 kilogram weights on each hand, and they are sweating, and they are twice my age. And I think not the most fit women aren't the skinniest, or they're not necessarily the most muscly. There's women who can shake it like nothing else.
Equalizer.
It's amazing.
You probably don't remember this, but my mom we used to work out to, I used to watch the 80s tapes, Jen, when I was younger.
Yes.
Jane Fonda, yes. We went through this with Jane. And then Richard Simmons went to the oldies.
Well, take away the toxicity of that and add community, and it's Zumba.
There was no toxicity of Sweat into the Oldies.
And the messaging of
there was no toxicity of Richard Simmons.
Oh no,
it was all there was no. That's what I'm saying. It was all wonderful. He had people of all different shapes and sizes.
Oh, I never saw his.
Oh no, Jen, you go on YouTube. Look at it. It was joyful. Richard Simmons was joyful. That's why the world mourned. Okay, Richard.
No, but his memoir was "I'm still hungry."
Still hungry after all these years.
Yeah, I always took that to mean he was. Yeah.
I mean, Richard Simmons was just honest about what was going on.
I got to go revisit Richard Simmons. Okay.
Richard Simmons is a gem, or was R.I.P., a gem and a fabulous person. And heart of gold, and he understood the pain of dieting and having a weight problem. He was a fat kid, okay? So he had, just like your Zumba class, it wasn't to all women, all shapes and sizes. He had his own center in Beverly Hills. And he took that concept and he put it on Sweat into the Oldies. So my mom and I would do Sweat into the Oldies when I was younger. And you just felt like everyone was like, there was no judgment and everyone was into it. I want a real life center like that right now. Like community.
Ellen has it.
Yeah, there's places around here, but it's all skinny minis and little sets. I don't want to do that.
I was going to reformer Pilates for a bit, and I was like, this makes me hate myself. And it feels so mean.
Everyone's
why is it so
hardcore.
Yeah, and I just want to, what I also like about the Zumba class is not that this is now an ad for my Zumba classes, but if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. You can just flail around. You can just do a shimmy. It doesn't matter. And you don't have to be good at it. Because I'm not good at it. And I've been going for a year and a half and I still mess it up.
just keep moving, keep shaking, keep dancing.
And those women are so ingrained in their community. A lot of them are cancer survivors. A lot of them do the Race for Life. Do you have Race for Life in the US? But
No,
like fundraisers for breast cancer.
But we have like things like that. I shouldn't say no so fast. I know that they have that
as a concept. Yeah, there'll be kind of 5K, 10K runs.
I apologize if we do have Race for Life.
But no, it's kind of, I've kind of had my eyes opened because I worked in community through brands and digital for my whole career. But then going to these spaces was quite humbling to see what, these women doing real community work, and they're volunteering every weekend, and they have a WhatsApp group where they talk about kind of if some of them are struggling to get to class that day and how we can kind of band together to get someone to class. And there was a message the other week about the instructor was like, I'm going to push you harder because summer's coming up. And I was like, oh, I wish she hadn't said that. And then she was like, and I know a lot of you have kids and you won't be able to come to the classes. So we're going to get more energy in this time so that you can get more out of your classes. And I was like,
not because of bikini bod, but for a very practical reason. Yes. And I love that.
And so she was like, you can't come to as many classes because the kids are on school holidays. So let's make the most of the time that we have together. And it was nothing about getting your body to look a specific way. It was just about, let's make the most of this time and get as much of our energy out. But yeah, it's just a really beautiful space. So that's where I am on a Saturday, like lunchtime. That's where I am.
I think this is my favorite answer. This is definitely my favorite answer.
I'm already like, I want to do a fat mascara Zumba, like meetup.
Can you imagine, Jen, if we did a fat mascara, like...
It'd be so fun.
And everyone would have to wear something like their cutest, like...
Like bring a look.
Bring a look.
Yeah.
Bring a look.
Like there's lots of brightly colored workout sets and...
Oversized tee.
I had a thing with my Zumba teacher where I was like, I have quite a big chest and I'm quite self-conscious about that because I feel like I get sexualized in certain contexts, and I always wear this I wear a sports bra and then I wear a long sleeve like sheer cover up kind of like this to class. And there was a point where I'd walk to the class in this outfit and I got there and it was boiling hot. It was a couple of weeks ago in London. It was sweltering and we don't really have AC. And I got into the class and I started doing the warm up, and my teacher just looked at me and she was like, are you like too cold or something? Like what's going on? And I was like, oh, I was just feeling a bit self-conscious. And she was like, you're going to suffer. She was like, take that off.
Take that off.
And she was like, no one cares. She was like, you look great. It's fine. No one's looking at you. Just, you need to prioritize how you're feeling. And so I took it off and I did the class, like just in my sports bra, which I felt quite exposed. And then she was going like, I'm so proud of you. Like you're doing really well. And now I go like, now it's become a thing, but it seems so silly. But that was just such a big thing for me. For her to just clock it and be like, what are you doing? Are you too cold? Like, it's absolutely boiling in here. Like, why are you wearing sleeves? And I was like, I just don't feel good about my... She was like, nah, come on. No one's looking at you. You need to be comfortable.
No, that's a major milestone. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just been a very comforting and beautiful experience for me. And I would recommend it to everyone, especially in a local leisure centre. I think it's not the most glam place. And I've taken a lot of my friends now, because I rave about it all the time. And they're like, initially like, oh, Zumba, like, that's like for old ladies or whatever. I don't want to go. And then they come and they're like, I love it. I'm having an amazing time. Because like all through the dances, there's women just being like, woo. It's just great. It's great.
I love that. That's the energy we want to leave everybody with at the end of this. I love that. Ellen, thank you so much for coming on Fat Mascara. This was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
We hope you enjoyed the show.
It's your reviews and feedback that help us make the podcast even better. Head over to iTunes to rate and review us, or email your thoughts to info@fatmascara.com.
We also want to answer your beauty questions and hear what products you love. To share a Raise the Wand product review or to ask a beauty question, email us at info@fatmascara.
If you send it as a voice memo file, we can even share your voice on the podcast. You can also do that by leaving us a voice message. Our phone number in the United States is 646-481-8182.
Thanks so much for listening.